So, welcome to Introduction to Grant Writing or Grant Writing Basics. Um, I think for many people, grant writing can seem really like a daunting journey. But what I'm hoping to do is that is to break down each step and make it a little, make it feel like it's a doable process. And I guess, you know what? I didn't introduce myself. So I'm always asking everybody else to introduce themselves. So I'm Katie Edson. I am the nonprofit librarian for the Pikes Peak Library District. And I said that to somebody yesterday and they're like, what does that mean? You work for nonprofit libraries? And I said, well, actually, we've got subject specialists in this library district, which is really unusual for a library district. We're super lucky here at the Pikes Peak Library District. So we have a law librarian, we have a business librarian, and we have myself, the nonprofit librarian. And my job is to reach out and work with all the nonprofits in El Paso County. And I even stretch my outreach a little bit to folks down in Pueblo and up to Woodland Park. And so I just try to reach as many people, and realistically, there's about 5,000 nonprofits here in El Paso County, and PPLD is the best. I'm glad you agree. And with that many nonprofits, they thought that wouldn't it be nice if there was a librarian who could reach out and help these nonprofits be more successful. And so that means that I help people with our two nonprofit databases that we have, and that's Colorado Grants Guide and Foundation Directory Online. I teach these great classes to these amazing people. I sit on boards and committees throughout the county. I just try to get out in the public as much as possible. And of course, with COVID, I used to do all these classes in person. And now I do them virtually, which is a bummer in many cases, right? I don't get to meet you guys face to face. On the other hand, it does mean that I get to reach a much greater audience because, the other day, folks in Pueblo asked me to give a class and I did it virtually. And there were people from Arizona in the class. And I was like, oh my God, I can't, I thought my reach was wide, but I didn't think it was going to be that way. Colorado Springs does have a very high number of nonprofits. And it's just, it's really wonderful. And I love meeting the nonprofits because for me, I live here in this city. And what excites me about the amazing work that all of you guys do is that you're making our community a better place to live. And so that makes me super excited to meet you guys and to help you out in any way I can. So, so let's get started. So this is our agenda. We've already kind of done our introductions. And so I'm hoping today that after we finish this, you're going to be able to describe what to include in a standard grant proposal that you would submit to a foundation. You'd be able to identify a few best practices in proposal writing. You'd be able to summarize the proposal process and really have the confidence to get started. I also wanted to mention that one of the handouts, so you guys should have gotten like a billion handouts from me, and this class, I think I give the largest number of handouts. You've got a grant timeline, and I kind of threw that together about a year ago because I had people asking me, what kind of timeline are they looking at when they are applying for grants? And, this isn't any hard or fast rule. In fact, everything I tell you, there's there's really no rule behind it. It's going to be all based upon the funder and the grant that you are writing. But you might want to take a look at that grant timeline. And I try to tell people to really think like 6 to 12 months out. And think about the preparation that's needed, who you're going to partner with, how you're going to compile all your information, and then how are you going to engage with the funder in the end. And so, when you get a chance, um, skim through that timeline, because I think it breaks it down nicely. So let's move on. I will also note that we do get funding from the El Pomar Foundation, which does help support the programs and the databases and the material that we get. So because and I'm just gonna go right past that, because I am part of this grant process with the El Pomar Foundation, it gives me even a little background as to what it's like to be on the side that has to send in the reporting information, which helps me out when I'm explaining things to you guys. So first and foremost here, I have this quote, and it's really important to think this proposal, that you may be writing in the near future, it's really like a contract. And the funders are going to expect you to live up to the promises that you write in this proposal. You are charged with finding the best ideas and solutions to accomplish your mission, whether that's ending childhood hunger here in Colorado Springs or preserving wildlife around the globe. For a funder, rather than setting up their own program, right, they're looking to us. They're looking to the nonprofits they can partner with to meet their goals and to fill their mission. They're looking for organizations they can trust with their resources. So it's up to you to demonstrate that you can be trusted. It's all about making your case for support. Think of the proposal as your opportunity to make your case. You're going to emphasize your organizational history and background, track records and results, your amazing accomplishments, your reputation. What kind of leadership do you have in the community? Other funding. What's your internal capacity to be able to follow through with this, the funding you receive? So as we go through each section of the proposal, really keep this theme in mind. How strong a case are you making? If you were a funder, would you invest in your organization? So just keep that in mind. So we're going to start off, and as I mentioned, I've tried to break things down piece by piece. And what I am talking about today with grant writing or proposal writing is going to be generic. I'm not specifically talking about one funder's requirement. What I'm giving you is the information, hopefully, that you can apply to any grant that you come across. Now, I'm not talking about government grants, because that's a little different, although there are a lot of similarities. So we're really talking about foundation grants. So it's also, though, really important to think about that you're going to follow whatever the funder's requirements are for their proposal. I assume, though, that there's going to be all the components that I'm talking about are going to be asked in one form or another. All right. So let's get started. So the first part of the proposal is going to be the statement of need. And The need statement is where you answer the big why questions, as in, why is your project necessary? Um, the statement of need helps set the stage for what your project is going to do. So there's really 4 components. And again, remember, I know there's a ton of um, language on this slide, and that's like a big rule you should do, but just know that you're going to get the slide and you'll be able to read this at your leisure. But I'll just go through. So the key components of your statement of need is going to be the description, the geography, population, and facts. And in facts, we're talking, real life stories, quotes, statistics. And I have included in your handout, of course, a worksheet, and the worksheet is there to help organize your ideas around the big questions. What is the problem your project will address? Who is affected by the problem and how? What are the facts and statistics that can be used to substantiate the problem and the impact on the affected population? Really think hard. If your needs statement describes your organization's funding, staffing, or equipment needs, start again, right? Keep the focus on the needs of the people and the issues you serve. So let's move on. And so the project description, this is the story of your program. And I tell people, anybody, just about anybody can write a grant, but those people who are a little more creative, maybe have a little bit more background in writing, those people have a little bit of an edge because it's all about crafting a narrative and the story of your program. So the project description, as I just said, is the main narrative about your project and how it will accomplish your goals. You are telling a story about what will happen when you apply your expertise to the need you've identified in your community. And, think about it like chapters in a book. The solution you present here flows from the statement of need. So the questions that are going to be answered by your project description is going to be, what is it? Who will benefit? Where will it take place? When will it begin? How long will it take? What are the expected outcomes? How's it going to be evaluated? How will it be sustained after the current funding cycle? So there's a lot to this. So we're going to break it down now. And again, here are the 5 main components. And this is going to be the longest section of your proposal. And as I mentioned a minute ago, funders may have their own requirements for what they want in this section, and the order of the components may vary, and even the funder may use slightly different language. So they may say, I have outcomes written here, but they may say objectives. Just always follow the guidelines set by the funder. So in this section, in the project description, this is where you're going to discuss how you will exactly address the issue that you addressed in your statement of need. Usually you will start off this section with a statement, including the project goals and objectives. You might say, you might be asked, is this project already being addressed? And if it is, what are you going to do differently? This section should clearly describe the who, the what, the where, the when, and the why of your strategy. For example, how is your plan going to be implemented? Who is going to do the work? Where is the work going to happen? You should be able to include a timeline or step-by-step plan showing exactly how the plan is going to be completed. And important, don't forget to include any collaborations with other agencies. Funders really like to see that. I was just talking to somebody yesterday about collaborations and how funders really like to see that. Any questions before I go on to talking about measurable outcomes. All right. Um, so some people have heard of the acronym SMART before. Other people haven't. So I'm gonna give a quick overview. Um, so programs are measurable results, right? There are specific things that will happen as a result of your project. Outcomes, which should not be confused with goals, and the goals are broad general statements of what you'll achieve. Outcomes are important because they outline your operating plan, they demonstrate a match with the funder's outcome, and they illustrate how you will measure your program's success. And of course, I have an outcomes worksheet that you can fill out that will help you, brainstorm and walk you through figuring out your outcomes. Remember, the difference between methods and outcomes. Methods are how you are going to get something done. Outcomes are what will happen as a result of those methods. You want to make sure your outcomes reflect the result, not the process to get there. For example, your goal might be our after-school program will help children read at grade level. But an outcome is going to say something along the lines of at least 25 out of 30 children participating in our after-school reading program will read at grade level by the end of the school year. They will pass a grade level reading proficiency test that is approved by the local school district. So it's a little bit more specific. So again, SMART outcomes are going to be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. Now, the methods that I just talked about. Methods, again, are how can you achieve your outcomes? You can think of the methods section as answering questions such as, what are the specific tasks? Why is this the best way to achieve your outcomes? Who's going to be responsible for each task? What are the resources you're going to need? Who are the participants and where do they come from? And when will these activities occur and over what time period? So all those important questions. We're going to move on now to staffing. Any questions before I get on to staffing? Because this is a really, well, it's all important, but staffing can be a little tricky. Okay. So the staffing part of the project description is where you will describe the responsibilities and the expertise of the staff and administration associated with your project. Project staffing will likely come up in your methods section, but right here you can also devote a little more attention to the qualifications and who is doing what. And of course, right, what do I have? I have a staffing worksheet for you, and you can fill in information, say about your paid staff. Maybe you have a senior coordinator and you might say that this, write a brief description. I don't know, something like the senior coordinator is going to recruit the tutors, and they spend 25% of their full-time position on doing work for that particular program. Maybe you have volunteers. Maybe you have administration or consultants. And consultants, they're typically not staff or employees, but they still, play a critical role. For example, you might have a reading instructor who's a consultant. Maybe you've got a steering committee that might fall under collaboration. It's really important to figure out who all is working on your specific program and what % of time are they doing or how much time. So if you have volunteers, you're going to capture how many volunteer hours um, an individual or multiple individuals are giving towards this specific program. It's really important. And that's going to come back not only in this section, of course, but it's also going to be a part of your budgeting. So you're actually now coming to the finish of your project description. So in this section, in the evaluation and sustainability portion, you're going to tell the funder how you will measure the success of your project and what your plans are for how you're going to keep it going. The evaluation plan, though honestly, it's really not just for your funders, it's really valuable for you and your organization because it's important that you understand what success means and how to measure it. And there's two different types of, two different ways to evaluate your success. And I'll talk about that in the next screen. And either one is appropriate. It just depends on the nature of your project and its outcomes. But for either type, you're going to need to describe what information you'll collect, how you'll collect it, and how you'll analyze the data. So as I mentioned, there's two different types. There's the qualitative and quantitative. And with your evaluation, you're telling the funder how they can determine whether or not the program has been a success. In the end, evaluation is a tool to determine the effectiveness of your programs. And it allows you and others to learn from your experience and improve your programs over time. And of course, I have a worksheet for that, for you to fill that out. And again, with these worksheets, you can use them or toss them in the bin. It's totally up to you. It depends on what, how you like to work, and maybe you have different resources, but what I'm giving you are just some potential tools. So back to this though, qualitative, right? That's going to be, maybe you're going to have some focus groups, or maybe you're going to take observational notes. You're looking to form, as this says, a complete picture by considering multiple perspectives. Now, quantitative, that's more facts. And this tends to be a little bit more formal. So quantitative methods, that's going to generate statistics. Maybe that's test scores. Again, going back to my example of after school reading program, you know, you're going to test these kids at the end of the year and see their improvement. So it also maybe is the number of participants. I keep statistics, again, for this grant that I get from the El Pomar Foundation. I'm going to count how many people were in this class, and I'm going to add that to my statistics. I track how many people enter the Rob Hilbert Nonprofit Resource Center that's based in the Penrose Library. How much foot traffic do we have? How many people use the databases that we provide? I capture all those statistics and I pass those on at the end of the year in my evaluation sustainability portion of the grant, that grant reporting that's required of me. Now, talking about sustainability, grant funding is finite, right? With start and end dates, it builds capacity. That is, it contributes to the future self-sufficiency of your organization by expanding services that might generate revenue. It will attract other funders in the future. It's important you don't want to be a fly-by-night project. New organizations are generally riskier ventures for funders. So if you're new, you need to demonstrate that you have a plan for achieving sustainability over time. But anybody really, no matter how old or new you are, you need to demonstrate this sustainability. Do you have a plan for continuing your project in the future? What other types of funding are you planning on pursuing? Funders generally like to see that organizations have a diverse array of funding. And I met with two individuals yesterday talking about finding grants, and I couldn't stress that enough. Um, Grants can't be your sole source of funding. It needs to be one part of your revenue stream. And funders really like to see that you're getting support, not just from them, but from individual contributors in your community. Maybe you do have a big benefactor. That's wonderful. Not everybody can. Maybe you have some other smaller grants as well that are all helping to contribute to this one project. So I have here, be clear and brief, really no longer than one or two short paragraphs. Again, it's going to depend on the grant, and and some online grants that are web-based have character requirements. So it might say that you can fit 750 characters, and the Common Grant application is one that's like this. So it will say, X number of characters. But realistically, you can put in more than what it says. But when that grant is then finalized and sent on, it is cut off at 750. So don't put 755, or that last bit of your word will not make it. So something just to consider. All right, so now you're also going to put your organizational information. And I would say, again, don't be too wordy, but make your organization stand out. You're going to have your history, so your origin story, your mission. You're clearly going to state the mission of your organization, your operations and expertise. I'm talking about describing your organization's other programs and expertise, including those successes that you've had with other programs. Your staff, list the size and composition of both paid and volunteers. This is not the big staffing. This is just, a small staffing list. When we're talking about the board, so you're going to mention the size and the structure of your board. With audience, you might write briefly about the people who your organization serves and how many are served and why they rely on your organization. And then, of course, any additional information that is requested of you. Now, this is kind of a big one. And I have one slide for this, discussion on project budgets. But I have a whole class that I talk for about an hour to an hour and a half about just this one slide, and that's coming up on January 27th. And if you want to learn more about what to include in a project budget, you can sign up for that class. So I do have a worksheet, of course, that you can look through and see what kind of information you should start gathering. But so I'll just briefly talk about what you're going to include. Funders, though, see the budget as a crucial tool in evaluating the credibility of your organization. And budgets come in a variety of formats. So you just have to make sure whatever format your funder prefers is what you do. Do they want a spreadsheet? Do they just want some numbers on a piece of paper? Generally speaking, though, this is just one page. But what's important with your budget is that it mirrors the narrative of your proposal. There are a lot of grant reviewers. They will read maybe your executive proposal and then flip to your budget. They're not going to read anything else. They're going to look first and see, is your budget clear? Does it make sense? I've reviewed now quite a number of grants, and I find that I do that as well. I will have a calculator and I will see if the numbers add up. So in the personnel, that's going to be your staffing. Non-personnel, that's going to be things like consultants, direct costs. That's going to be all things that are directly related to your project. And indirect costs, another word for that is overhead. You might have also heard the term supporting services. So those are the people and things that support the entire organization. So we're talking maybe rent, the cost of the printer, the copier, or the, staples, all that type of thing. That's going to be your indirect costs. We also discuss support and revenue. And again, I'm not going to go into that here. You may not be the person who completes the budget, but you still should be able to review it and make sure that it mirrors again what has been written up in the project. You're going to make sure that all the paid staff are listed. You need to calculate the salary for each person. And that includes also knowing the fringe benefits. So, adding in things like healthcare and retirement, that all has to be listed. Now, many of you might be working for an all volunteer organization, so that it's going to look a little different. And those of you who work for a really small organization, you're going to be like, well, that's me. I do everything. You're just going to need to know what all is required in your budget. And for those of you who are in a large organization, you can go to your finance person and say, could you please put this budget together for me? Anybody have any questions before we move on? All right, I know. I'm kind of just whizzing through this page and it's a little more complicated. So now your proposal conclusion. So this is where you tie your proposal together, but you're also going to create that sense of urgency for your program. You're going to include your vision for the future and the long-term impact of your work. This is the part where you can add some emotion. You can also recognize the funder here. And this is where you're going to be answering that important "so what" question. All right. Okay, good. I answered the question.